Okay, shall we begin? Okay, I wanted to after last week spending a lot of time on Buddha's brain and talking about some of the criticisms of Buddhism. I wanted to move now to some more discussion of this book, Wrapped, which I think makes a very good counterpoint to what they're talking about in Buddha's brain. It's interesting too because this book is written by a woman. The other book was written by men, and I think you see that in the perspectives. Anyway, I'm going to start talking a little bit from this book. Staying focused is an excellent strategy for well-being, but not necessarily an easy one at first. You may remember that several points in the book, in Buddha's brain, Hansen talks about the fact that, that focusing is easy, that he talks often about how easy something is, put some concentration, it's easy, and I like the fact that she's taking a different approach. It's not necessarily an easy one at first, okay? Just grasping attention's role in determining your experience can be a challenge because it requires seeing the forest instead of the trees. As psychology increasingly investigates what makes people feel and function well rather than poorly, it's ever more clear that the skillful management of attention is the first step towards any behavioral change and covers most self-improvement approaches like a vast umbrella. Then, too, the mastery of focus is a skill which, like any other, takes discipline and effort to develop. Discipline and effort were words that I didn't see often in this book. Did you notice that? It's a sort of an easier approach to Buddhism light, so to say. Except for the monastic aspect, but of course they weren't really focusing on monasticism. Considering attention's importance, it's surprising that until recently science has come up with few strategies to improve it. Since the Arab world first discovered coffee's bracing effects, pharmacology has produced attention-boosting stimulants such as Ritalin and its variations, and newer agents such as modafinil. I don't know what it is. Never heard of it. Which I'm glad to say I've never heard of. I don't want to know about these things. But all have side effects and the potential to be abused. Where behavioral approaches are concerned, William James suggested various tricks, such as taking a fresh perspective on your target or elaborating on its various aspects. Some of his modern heirs are experimenting with computerized workouts to improve focusing ability. However, most new strategies have a back-to-the-future quality derived from their origin in meditation. Okay? This is cute. I'm going to read that sentence again. A back-to-the-future quality, right? Going back and then putting meditation back into the future. Okay? Derived from their origin in meditation, secularized and made amenable to scientific study. These cognitive regimens can strengthen attention and improve well-being and are both free and safe, all of which must appeal to the 75 million baby boomers and their aging children, who are equally concerned about maintaining both their mental and their physical health. It's interesting that she brought up the Ritalin, because this is such an important issue. How many children are put on Ritalin and grow up on Ritalin, on this drug? I find it really scary. I'm going to read that sentence again concerning the Ritalin. Since the Arab world first discovered coffee's bracing effects, pharmacology has produced attention-boosting stimulants, such as Ritalin and its variations, and newer agents, newer types of drugs. So, what's really amazing to me, in the early days of the dojo, we had some people who started karate that were taking drugs, drugs, pharmaceuticals. And they explained to me when they began karate that they were on drugs because in case something should happen to them, to let me know. And in all these cases, in the early days of karate, it didn't take very long before they were able to get off their medication. The most common meditation was a tranquilizer that people were taking like candy at that time. But people were trying to get off of it, trying to get away from it. And that's why a lot of people, at least at our dojo, considerable number of people got involved in karate thinking that maybe it would be something that, because of their training, they wouldn't need the drug. And that's what happened. Over and over and over again, people would tell me, that, hey, I'm off of my drugs, and I would always tell them, have you seen your doctors? That he knows you're off. Yeah, everything's fine. All the problems that I couldn't sleep, I was always nervous, I was always worried. Now I do karate, and I'm not worried anymore. Okay, this was really good. But now, I see so many kids and adults who are taking Ritalin. And they're not trying to get off of it because it's too easy. It's sort of, why worry about learning how to focus, about attention? Like she's saying here, that learning how to focus isn't easy. Learning how to focus is a discipline. It takes discipline and energy, right? Things that he didn't really stress. There's a couple of words here and there, but he didn't really stress in this book. That meditation is easy, but it's not easy. If you're really going to be serious about what martial arts or about what Buddhism, because they're all that come from the same thing, is about, you have to recognize that nothing in life is easy, or I should say nothing significant in life is easy. So if you're taking Ritalin, that's easy. Yeah, pop a pill. But if you want to be able to live your life without drugs, that's more difficult, okay? That means you're going to have to face up to your own issues. You're going to have to learn how to focus. You're going to have to learn how to concentrate, because otherwise you're going to need these drugs. In my family, it was one of the saddest things that we were very close with another family that had two children the same age as our children, and two boys, and they were very close friends with my two girls. And as I say, that myself and my wife were friends with the parents. And when the boys were put on Ritalin, their lives just went totally downhill. They became more and more dependent on Ritalin, and they looked like two kids who were drugged up, which is exactly what they were. But you know what's strange? Is that I was close friends with the father, who was a terrific athlete. And his kids were athletic too. They were really good athletes. But when you're stuck in school all day long, sitting at a desk, and no physical education programs, and no athletics, it can drive boys wacky. And that's what's happening in a lot of families. Because this is something, it affects girls too, but it affects inordinately the boys. Boys just have difficulty sitting still. I try to imagine if I lived as a child in the schools as they exist now, I would go crazy. I would absolutely go crazy. I lived for the athletics program when I was a child because we had a good athletics program. It was the way it was in every school at that time. And every day we would have athletics. And, as I say, all of us, the boys, we just loved it. Now, the girls, I'm sure did too, although they always had it separate. The girls in one thing, the boys in another thing. But nobody thought of needing Ritalin at that time. And if you grew up and you needed a drug, it was something that you wanted to get off of as soon as possible. But now this mentality has changed where it's just so easy to be taking these things. And that's why I'm really glad that she's mentioning this, and mentions that that the other approach, talking about meditation and talking about putting discipline into what you're doing, into your life, into your focus, you can do these things and they won't have any side effects, right? At least any negative side effects. The focused life requires not just a robust capacity for paying attention, but also the discerning choice of targets that will invite the best possible experience. Much is made of the fact that human beings are the only creatures to know that they must die. But they're also the only ones to know that they must find something engaging to focus on in order to pass the time, increasingly a lot of time. As Ralph Waldo Emerson, who was William James' godfather, put it, to fill the hour, that is happiness. Isn't that true? To fill the hour, that is happiness. Now I have to tell you, so many kids in our dojo over the years, over the years that I've had the dojo, 40 years, were sent to the dojo by their principal or by their teacher, sent to our school, partly because of the article about the impact of martial arts training on the lives of children, on the psychology and on the physiology of children. The findings were remarkable, and it made a huge hit. This is a very, very famous magazine. It's an academic journal, and the study was in part sponsored by the Hospital for Sick Children. It was the Hospital for Sick Children, University of Toronto, and York University, and they jointly sponsored the financing of the study. And in that study, the Hospital for Sick Children was looking for something that would get children off of Ritalin. They were looking for something that children who had problems, like for example, some children have cancer. We had quite a few cancer children in our dojo. And how can they learn to cope with cancer? You may remember some of them from years back. The Hospital for Sick Children was sending us a lot of kids like this. A lot of kids were on Ritalin, thinking that doing karate would make a difference. And it did. It made a tremendous difference. It was a right approach. I just wish that, now, so if you take them off Ritalin and there's no physical education program, nothing to keep people, there's got to be something in life that will take the place of the fact that you're taking a drug, because you're having trouble just sitting still or you're having trouble focusing. You've got to learn how to focus. But short of karate, there aren't a lot of avenues, and it's really frustrating. I like that last sentence: to fill the hour, that is happiness. Because when you can focus, when you can concentrate, filling time is not a problem. You can always practice karate all day. I find that I'm happiest when I can practice karate all day. Sometimes people, like if our family goes away on holiday and people say, okay, so what did you do? I practice karate all day. So some people would find that strange. Well, that's your profession. Yeah, but I can't practice it all day. That's the problem. But when I'm on vacation, I can practice karate all day, and the more I can do that, the happier I am. And it's amazing how you can produce the energy to do it because it's part of your discipline. That you just refuse to allow yourself to get tired. Okay, deciding what to pay attention to for this hour, day, week, or year, much less a lifetime, is a peculiarly human predicament. And your quality of life largely depends upon how you handle it. Doesn't that make sense? How you handle this predicament. What are you going to do with the time in your life? Because you have two choices. You can make it meaningful or you can waste it. Moses got his focus from God, and Picasso from his nearly supernatural creativity. We have other motivations and gifts, and most of us have to go through a more complicated process to find the right thing to focus on. We must resist the temptation to drift along, reacting to whatever happens to us next, and deliberately select targets, from activities to relationships, that are worthy of our finite supplies of time and attention. Some decisions about what to focus on, such as which profession to pursue or person to live with, automatically receive serious attention. All right? Because these are important things. Other choices may be less obvious, but are just as important to the tenor of your life experience. For example, deciding to concentrate on your hopes rather than your fears, to attend to the present instead of the past, to appreciate that just because something upsetting happens, you don't have to fixate on it. Of course, that's the theme of what we've been discussing about, that our brain is plastic enough that we can determine. It's not just that our brain tells us what we can do, but we can tell our brain what we want to do. Still other targets may seem inconsequential. Focusing on a book or a guitar instead of a rerun, a chat instead of an email. Hey, we were talking about that today, huh? Okay. How much time is lost in everyone's everyday life. Email, back and forth, just worthless, meaningless stuff, instead of being able to do things that really are important. An apple instead of a donut. Well, that's a big thing. Yet the difference between passing the time and time well spent depends on making smart decisions about what to attend to in matters large and small. Then doing so as if your life depends upon it. As far as quality of life is concerned, it does depend upon that. Time well spent, as opposed to just passing the time. Where the quality of life is concerned, focus is not everything, but it is a great deal. The question is, if all the world's a stage, as Shakespeare put it, where do you shine the spotlight of your attention? Isn't that an important question, eh? Where do we put the spotlight of our attention? The idle mind is the devil's workshop. Conveys the fact that when you lose your focus, your mind tends to fix on what could be wrong with your life instead of what's right, putting you in a bad frame of mind. As Look for the Silver Lining suggests, focusing on the productive aspects of difficult situations does indeed lead to more satisfying experience. Common wisdom aside, attention research is full of surprises. Focusing on upbeat emotions such as hope and kindness, literally, not just figuratively, expand your world, just as dwelling on negative feelings shrinks it. Contrary to the messages from our wired workaholic culture, multitasking is a myth. Not just individuals, but also cultures have characteristic ways of attending that create different realities. The reason you can't remember the name of the person you just met isn't impending Alzheimer's, but because you didn't pay attention to it in the first place. I don't know how many people I know over 50 who can't remember anything, and they'll tell me it's impending Alzheimer's. It's not Alzheimer's. They could never concentrate even 20 years ago. It's the same thing, okay? Concentration will enable you to remember a person's name. But because you didn't pay attention to it in the first place, even very smart people can make dumb decisions about important matters if they focus on the wrong things. I'm going to repeat that last section here. The reason you can't remember the name of the person you just met isn't impending Alzheimer's, but because you didn't pay attention to it in the first place. Even very smart people can make a dumb decision about important matters if they focus on the wrong things. Rapidly developing neuroscience, of which many psychologists still aren't aware, shows that as the terms in focus and out of focus suggest, attention shapes your experience by selecting and clearly depicting something in your external or internal world, leaving the rest in a blur. This two-part neurophysiological process basically functions in the same way whether you're zeroing in on a cat or a concept, a fragrance or a feeling, but it's easier to grasp in the sensory world. You have only to walk down a city street or country lane to notice that the environment contains approximately a zillion more things, from traffic and buildings to flora and fauna, than your 3-pound brain can process for you at any given moment. Your ability to focus on just a few of those things and screen out the rest allows you to experience a more or less orderly world. Indeed, the terrifying bad trips associated with large doses of LSD are partly attributed to the drug's release of the brain's attentional brakes, which flood the user way too much information. By filtering your experience, however, attention also assembles a reality that's far more partial and individual than you think. I wanted to go back to this part about LSD. Indeed, the terrifying bad trips associated with large doses of LSD are partly attributed to the drug's release of the brain's attentional brakes. If you've ever seen anyone who's been on LSD, I mean, it's frightening to watch because that's exactly what happens. You know, it's just that their brain is flooded with all sorts of things that they can't control, and that's why when I was a university student and LSD was just rampant on the campuses all over, I saw so many of my friends freak out like never came back. You know, like that's what a bad trip was about. They just freaked out and never came back. And some of my closest friends are still in mental institutions from all those years back, you know, when I first knew them. They've never been able to sort of, you know, recalibrate their brain. That's the nice thing about the discipline of concentration and focus. It's the opposite of taking drugs. It's the opposite of being dependent upon something outside yourself, putting powers over you from drugs or other things like that then rule your life, whether it's Ritalin or LSD or other things. It's really, really sad. There's a section in here, and this book was written before the Tiger Woods scandal. There's a section in here where she's talking about Tiger Woods and about the amazing concentration that he has. And I was feeling kind of sorry for her because, you know, she doesn't know what happened, you know, afterward, okay? So as I'm reading, you know, and seeing, her description about, you know, like, of all the athletes in history, there has probably never been an athlete who's had the powers of concentration like this individual. And then she ends the paragraph by saying, a person who can put so much focus like that probably, and this is, she's not the first one to say this, but this is a well-known thing, and it's something to be aware of, probably has problems with inattention at home. He's probably a man who has problems with his wife. This was written before, the scandal came out. But isn't that interesting how she was able to predict something? Because here I am feeling sorry for her. Like, okay, she's going to be saying about how great this concentration is. But it is a problem with people who are so intensely focused that when it's time off, like an athlete, okay, is focused on his athletics, but when it's time off, they tend to be the opposite, okay? They tend to be inattentive to things. So it's something to be aware of, because it's still something that, what can you say? Nothing in life is perfect, but it's something that every person who has this ability to focus, you always have to be aware of the downside of that, okay? That you have to be striving to be more complete in your life, not make the mistakes that Tiger Woods made. Isn't that a funny aside from the book? Huh? Just thinking about paying attention affects your brain, revving it up for the actual experience. If I ask a question, what does your chair's pressure feel like on your back? You'll instantly access that information. That's input that was present all along. But when you turn up its volume, you permit it to come up to the level of your awareness. Similarly, when you drive a car, everything framed by the windshield is technically visible. If you become engrossed in the news on the radio or a conversation with a passenger, however, you're unaware of most of that scenery. You've turned down the sight dial and allowed audition to capture your attention. We have to make decisions. Again, like what she's saying before. Now, there's an interesting paragraph here that, if you haven't been exposed to this, you have to be. Attention's selective mechanism, okay? So remember the selective mechanism, okay? We have to decide whether we're going to focus on something, what we're going to focus on, or if we're the type of person who just is incapable of focusing. We just go through life letting our stimuli just be measured by what's around us. Attention's selective mechanism of biased competition boosts your efficiency by allowing you to fashion a coherent world. But it also imposes boundaries on that construct, making it more idiosyncratic and fragmented than you assume. For verification, you have only to note the honest differences in perspective that surface in your next disagreement with friends or family. Renowned as a poetic treatment of memory, the classic Japanese film Rashomon, which portrays 4 characters' very different accounts of the same event, is also a documentary on attention. Now, if you haven't seen Rashomon, which most people I'm sure haven't, it's a Japanese film. It's a story about a samurai, and it is probably the most important film ever made. It's in black and white. The director is Akira Kurosawa, the greatest of Japanese filmmakers. It is a brilliant, brilliant film. When it came out, the whole world was just amazed at the insight that came out of this film. And it's a film about concentration and about memory. And as I say, if you haven't seen it, you just got to see this film, Rashomon. Your life will never be the same after this film. You'll always be questioning yourself about memory. And the interesting thing, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about it. Somebody's murdered, and the police are trying to find out what happened, and who was the one who murdered. And the 4 people are each investigated. And you see one after another. It's a very long part of the film. As they're, it's not one of these films that goes from scene to scene, okay? You'll hear the long passage of what the woman says happened, what the samurai says happened, what each of the characters. And you have to figure out which one is the one who's the murderer. And it's absolutely amazing because it's playing tricks with your mind. Did anyone see this movie by any chance? Great. Yeah. So if you haven't seen it, you got to see it. Most important, where the quality of your life is concerned, this imaginary ramble shows that by choosing to focus on something specific, birds and certain ones at that, you had a very particular experience in the park. If you had paid rapt attention to flora rather than fauna, or to thinking over a personal problem or chatting with a companion, Your time there would have been very different. Moreover, by attending to any of these deliberately selected targets, or even making a conscious decision to veg out for a spell, you have had a far better experience than many of us have much of the time, captured by whatever flotsam and jetsam happens to wash up on our mental shores. In short, to enjoy the kind of experience you want, rather than enduring the kind that you feel stuck with, you have to take charge of your attention. And be aware, too, of the problems that come with it. Like in karate, we train too much, we strain our bodies sometimes, okay? It just comes with the territory. We have to be able to accept that and be able to work it in, and understanding that there are limits on what we can do. Okay, I'm not meaning to scare anybody or say that all this thing that we've been doing about attention is all wrong, but it's just that attention also has another side to it. At Ascension Monastery in Sichuan province, monks mix tea into tsampa, roasted barley flour, to make a meal. The tea seasoned with salt and yak butter. Doesn't sound good, I don't know. Is brewed from leaves sold in bricks, such as this one marking the year of the horse. Now, my wife pointed this, I hadn't read this issue yet. My wife pointed out the monastery, and it's really, really interesting. You should take a look at it, because when I was looking at it, I was amused to see that, although this is in Tibet, this is so similar to the monastery where one of the monasteries where I taught in Japan. Something that is held in common, between the different countries, but it's still Buddhism. But you can take a look at this later on. How many cups of tea do you think people, the monks in the monastery, drink a day? What do you think, Ravi? Okay. What do you think?
Maybe 5.
5? Okay. The monks drink 40 cups of tea a day. Wow. 40 cups of tea. No wonder they don't have much meals. With all that tea, how can you eat anything? Boy, oh boy. I mean, it wasn't like that in Japan. I mean, we drank a lot of tea, and miso soup. Made me think about all the liquids, the tea and miso soup, with a couple of vegetables thrown in. But isn't that amazing? So you might want to take a look at this later on, because it's really cute. Okay, I want to get back to Buddha's brain, and I prepared so many things, and since this is the last session, I have to be careful because there's no more tomorrow, so I have to finish off. So I'm being very selective in what I want to go through. He has a sentence here in the section where he's talking about equanimity. Now, of course, equanimity, it's not just in Buddhism that is something that's important, but we all value equanimity. To be relaxed, to be able to focus on something from a point of being able to be in control over yourself. And he has a sentence here: equanimity means not reacting to your reactions, whatever they are. Now, as I said, there's different types of Buddhism, but this is the most un-Buddhist thing I have ever seen. Equanimity means not reacting to your reactions, whatever they are. Because in Buddhism, you're always questioning yourself. You're always searching ways to make yourself stronger, better, to be able to enhance your concentration and your focus, your discipline. But there's something deeper than this too. Try doing something like that when you have children. Equanimity means not reacting to your reactions, whatever they are. I found one of the most important things that I valued so much when my children were young is that I would have to not only react to them, but also to my reactions to them. Okay, so the same thing here. Equanimity means not reacting to your reactions, whatever they are. Okay, so we're talking about my reactions to the reactions of what my children are doing, because I would have to measure, did I handle the situation right? Because children are precious, right? So you have to think, okay, when you've reacted to something, you're not looking just at the something, but you're looking at your reaction to it to see how it can be improved upon, forcing yourself to question yourself. It's something that's stressful, and I think that's why he doesn't like this aspect of it, okay? But it's something that is absolutely essential. as part of your development as a human being. Personal code, that's on page 148, third paragraph. I think this was a good part of the book. Now write your personal code of unilateral relationship virtues. This could be a handful of words, or more extensive do's and don'ts. Whatever its form, aim for language that is powerful and motivating, that makes sense to your head and touches your heart. It doesn't have to be perfect to be useful, and you can always revise it later. For example, it might include statements like these. Listen more, talk less. Don't yell or threaten other people, and don't let them do that to me. Every day, ask my wife 3 questions in a row about how things are going for her. I don't know. That's not me, that's him, right? Okay. Get home by 6 every night to have dinner with the family. Well, if you're in the dojo, it's earlier than 6. Okay. But I think, I thought it was cute because it's something that I think is an important part of life. And that's writing down things that happen to you, writing down ideas, keeping a sort of a personal code that you keep updated, writing down your katas, that it helps you to remember them. Because the act of writing, okay, I'm speaking now not just as a karateka, but as a writer, okay? The act of writing changes what you think of in your brain. You start writing a book, okay? And that book, when it's finished, is not the same book that you had in your brain. Yet it's the same brain that wrote the book, okay? When you're writing the material, you're translating it from your head. Sometimes it can be so frustrating because in your head, your brain is zooming so fast, and you're sitting down at the computer and you're trying to write this out, and you're finding that it just isn't coming out as fast as you'd like it. But then in the end, when you finish a day's writing, you look at it and you say, this isn't what I was thinking of, but this is what I wanted. This is better. I mean, what you thought you wanted, by the experience of writing, changes. And you realize that what you thought you wanted to express is not the same thing. And this is something that writers experience. But the trouble is that not enough people are writers. But we can all be writers just for the experience of understanding that what we think in our brain is not necessarily what we really believe. It's the discipline of the writing, of forcing it out of your brain and into language, not just things that are flowing through your brain at remarkable speed, but to get it down to a speed that you can understand. It completely changes what it is. I told people the story of the first draft of Samurai Spirit. And when I started writing the book, and I spent weeks on that first draft, and when I finished it, I read it through, and then I burned it. Okay, I burned the manuscript, and I took the. So I should never be tempted. Okay, because I realized that what I was writing was the book that I didn't want to write. Somehow in my mind, I knew that what I was writing was sort of getting out all the sort of prelude to what was really important. And that's why I wanted it out of the computer, the manuscript out of my, the printed version out of my life. That was it. Now I'm starting all over, and I'm going to write the book that I really want to write, which is Samurai Spirit. Okay? But first I had to get rid of the other. Now, when I would tell that to people, they would be amazed. Wasn't that a little bit rash, throwing the book out? No, because creation involves destruction at the same time. That, some of what you write is going to be bad, and you just have to get rid of that. It's a really, really interesting thing. It's really important that everyone get into the habit of writing. And for your age, this is a really good thing to do. To start, to keep a diary, an agenda, and a karate notebook, okay? Because that makes all the difference in the world. In writing things out, you remember things better, and also, especially the essentials, because that's what you're writing out, the essentials. Your brain is full of so many things, but it's the essentials that you'll end up putting down on the paper. And that's something that's really, really important. Practice non-contention. That's page 164, third paragraph. I need a drink of water. Don't argue unless you have to. Inside your own mind, try not to get swirled along by the mind streams of other people. Reflect on the neurological turbulence underlying their thoughts. the incredibly complicated, dynamic, and largely arbitrary churning of momentary neural assemblies into coherence and then chaos. Getting upset about somebody's thoughts is like getting upset about spray from a waterfall. Try to decouple your thoughts from the other person's. Tell yourself, she's over there and I'm over here. Her mind is separate from my mind. Whoa, sometimes I think he goes so way off, I just can't believe this, because martial arts has a totally different way of approaching this. And, okay. When I was in graduate school, before I came to Canada, when I was in graduate school in the U.S., and every graduate school I attended, there were always problems with things called the comprehensive examinations. Any of you ever heard of these things? How many have gone through comprehensive examinations? I mean, we live to tell about it. That is really one of the worst experiences, isn't it? To have to go through comprehensive examinations. Have you had to go through this yet, or you don't have it?
More intelligently.
Yeah.
Less painfully. Well, I don't know.
No, probably.
More intelligently. They do come to
Yeah. There has been a problem ever since the beginning of universities. How do you deal with comprehensive examinations? Because they are so totally unfair and so totally the stress that it causes in the students is so totally unnecessary. It could be done in a much better fashion. And when I was in graduate school, I worked out a way of changing the way comprehensive examinations would be given. And I wrote out, you have to be a writer, right? I wrote out all the details of my framework, and I presented it to my professors. And I convinced them that this is something that would really be a very good step, okay? And I took an approach of saying that every university spends years and years and years, where every year a fresh group of graduate students come in and they try to change the way the comprehensive examinations. And yet, year after year, for hundreds of years, they've been the same system. So I said that I just look upon this as a provisional thing. Everyone's going to dislike my idea. Those who are left-wingers, they want to go away, do away with it altogether, which isn't going to happen because you have to give examinations, right? For graduate school. You can't let people get out without examinations, but they can be fairer, okay? And then there'd be people on the right side, the right wing, who would say, no, this has lasted all these years, and my professors would say, we had to go through it, you have to go through it too. It's part of the suffering for your PhD. Okay, so I said, I look upon this just as a provisional thing, and I think I can get a vote, in our favor. Now, I was president of the Graduate Student Union, so that put me in a position where I could really try and make things happen. But it wasn't going to happen without a fight. You know what I mean? Like the type of thing that he's talking about, sort of like avoiding, what you need to dive into and really fight for when something is right. Isn't that true? It's not just saying, okay, look at it from their point of view, look at all the churning and all the problems that they have. Yeah. But nevertheless, if you're trying to make a meaningful change, so what I did when I was in graduate school in the U.S. is I knew it wouldn't pass. So the most frustrating thing in the world to live in the 1960s is that everybody is late. Nobody ever comes on time. So I was president of the Graduate Student Union. So I would say, okay, we'll have a meeting at 10 o'clock, Monday morning. I get there at 10 o'clock, and I'm waiting 10:30, 11 o'clock, and the professors are there, and I'm there, and one or two students will float in, but you need a quorum. You need a certain percentage. I forget what it was, And so nothing ever gets done, and the professors have no respect for the students because the students are wasting their time. That's what the 1960s, what I most remember about the 1960s. So one day, I had made an arrangement with the people who backed my proposal, and I said, I'm setting the meeting for 8 a.m. I need you to be there. And they swore to me they would be there, okay? Okay, so I announced that we're having the meeting at 8 a.m. We're going to drive it through, and we're going to pass the resolution or not pass it right away. So be here at 8 a.m. So the day of the assigned day at 8 a.m., the people who I really pressured, they were all there. The professors were all there. I was all there. It took us 5 minutes. We passed the resolution. Okay? And that was that. I plowed it through. The other guys came at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. Where is everybody? And then they start reading about the resolution was passed. And of course, they were complaining. And they protested it to the head of the head of the university, saying that, they were just late for a couple of minutes. It's not fair. And the head of the program said it was fair. It was all done according to the way it needed to be done. Okay? You know where I got that strategy? From Musashi Miyamoto. Okay? The most famous samurai of all. Okay? Give them a time and then just, let them drown themselves, because most people can't deal with time. Okay? And that's what it was in the 60s. Anyway, the resolution passed. And that's still the way the university that gives their comprehensive examination. Okay? Because I'm in touch still with people from that university, and they never changed it. It was only meant to be the provisional thing, but I knew it would never change because it was a good system. To give you an idea of what I wanted to do, I speak many languages. So at that time, we had to have 2 foreign languages. So we had to pass difficult exams in 2 languages. Now, most people would find that really difficult. I didn't. So I argued, instead of having 2 language exams, why not just say that people have to, the whole idea of having a foreign language, knowledge of a foreign language, is that you become familiar with Russian economic development, or, Russian computers, or whatever, that you become familiar with their body of work. Why not give people the option of taking the language exams or studying the culture of a country and having to write a 10-page paper or a 20-page paper? I said, the professors, you guys decide that. And everyone liked the idea, except for a lot of the left-wing guys and a lot of the right-wing guys, on both sides. But that's the ideas that passed. When I came to University of Toronto, I did the same thing. This is in my program at when I was a student at the University of Toronto. And I did the same thing in getting the group together. Only this time I wasn't president of the Graduate Student Union. I just influenced the president of the Graduate Student Union. Once you're president of a Graduate Student Union, you will never want to be president of another Graduate Student Union. It's just too crazy. So I let the new guy do the work. But I was behind it all. And it passed again. But it was my doing that got it through. So what happened is we have the round, a round table, and we're all there, because I wasn't going to use the same trick again. Now it was the 70s, not the 60s. I'd never get away with it. People come more on time. So the people who disagreed with me started calling me names. Can you believe this? So we're there, our professors and students, graduate students like myself, and they were calling me an idiot. They were calling me stupid. They were calling me, all sorts of names. And I'm just smiling. And one of the guys who was sitting next to me, a guy from Alberta, so he had one of those Western hats, they kept calling me, as Mr. Konzak. He was referring, mocking me. And every time they mocked me, they just made it better for the project that I was trying to pass. Now I have to say that I had already taken my comprehensive examinations the old way. I had already passed them. So I had nothing to gain. And I was trying to explain that to everybody. I had nothing to gain. Okay? I'm doing this because I think this is the right thing to do. And I think I can do it because I did it once before. And I think I can convince enough people to do it. But every time somebody got up to say something, and they couldn't help getting some type of a dig into me, it just helped the cause more. And I just kept calm. Because that's what a karateka can do, right? In the most trying circumstances. Because believe me, that guy who was sitting on my right, I was tempted to take him, and give a nice suto to his neck, But, just staying calm is the most important thing in situations, the most important factor in situations like this. Now, this occurred in 1972, okay? So that was almost 40 years ago. Do you think it's still in place? Yeah, it's still there. That's still, again, I had proposed it as a transitional till something better comes along. But I knew something better wouldn't come along. This was a well-designed project. And nobody ever wanted to go back to the language exams anymore. The idea of you can have a language exam, Or you can have the idea of writing an essay which shows your familiarity with, because so many things are translated anyway, right? Why do you have to be the first one to translate something? Why don't you give it, the important works in German, etc., are translated. By the way, taking that exam, did you actually take the language exam? Did you have to take the language exams? Yeah, because you took it in Russian. Yeah. Okay. I took it in German, and I was really good in German, and I passed the exam. But I found that exam the most crazy thing I've ever seen. It was so difficult. And I was wondering, what were they trying to prove? They gave me an article from a chemistry journal, professional chemistry journal to translate. What do I know about technical chemistry in German, who the hell designed things like this? It would be different if my field was chemistry. My field wasn't chemistry, Did you have that?
We only had to do the field.
Just the field.
Oh,
they would pick it out, and they had warned us about that. But how could I prepare? There was something from chemistry, something from physics, something from poetry. It was just insane. So anyway, it all changed. But I was really proud of that because that's part of being a karateka, and that's what we do. In times of tension, we could really hold our ground. Okay. I was talking about the experience of being able to stand up in situations as a karateka. Karate-do isn't just about fighting. In fact, probably most of us will not ever have to fight in our lives. Although we may face situations where we're challenged or where somebody may grab us, but just grabbing and the way we look with karate spirit, okay, that person will let go. Now, it's not my supposition. This is a point that's been well established, that when psychiatrists and psychologists interview rapists and violent criminals in the prisons, and they ask this question: have you ever had a situation where you've attacked a woman? Okay, if they're interviewing a rapist, okay, a serial rapist. Have you ever had a situation where you attack a woman, you grab her or whatever, and you find that you change your mind, that this isn't the person you're going to go after? Oh yeah, and they all say it's virtually universal. Yes, I grabbed this woman, and she looked at me, and there's no way, and there's no way I was going to fight her. It would be too hard. Even if I defeat her, she'll bite me, she'll scratch me. Of course, not mentioning about karate. That wasn't the point here. Probably she did have karate practice. If somebody was able to grab her arm and she kept her cool, then she probably knew martial arts. But that's the most amazing thing about martial arts. It's preparing for life in the deepest meaning of Buddhism. Okay? It's developing your strength, not so you can become violent, but that you can deal with situations that make a better world. It doesn't help the world if women give in to aggressors. It doesn't help the world if the types of examples that I'm giving about changing the systems of comprehensive examinations, which were so unfair and so sexist, okay, and making a better system and being intimidated, okay, like they were trying to do to me. But I was a karateka. But in both these experiences that I was talking about, doing my master's in the U.S. and doing my PhD here, it was interesting that I would always think back after both experiences about what it was like when I was younger, before I became as good as I was in karate, before I had that type of confidence, that I knew I would have just been overwhelmed by all the resistance, by the people calling me names. I would have gotten angry, out of control by the person calling me Mr. Konzak. I knew that that's the way it would have been, because I knew myself, as a younger person who didn't yet have, I had the karate training, I started that as a teenager, but I wouldn't have had the maturity that came with advanced level that by this time I had attained, and that I was very proud of that. That made me a person that I could really look up to myself, and that sense of self-respect, self-confidence is very important in life. In the second incident, where I was already used to this, I didn't even prepare a ploy like I did the first time, and I was thinking about how in situations like this in the past, I would have lost, I would have given up, I would have just felt, there's too many people against me, too many people who are vocal. But we need more karate. Because we need people who are willing to stand up and willing to just calmly accept the humiliation that other people are trying to heap upon you, because you know you'll win. You know what I mean? You'll know you win. You'll know if you can just keep your cool, then everyone else will look stupid and you'll look really special, because you are. I remembered that before I was like that, I would think, why can't I be calmer? How come, as human beings, we can't sort of treat a situation like that as if we're at home, we just finished a great supper, and we're lying down in bed, just thinking for a couple of minutes. Why can't things happen in those situations where I'm calm and relaxed and I've just eaten dinner? Why do they always seem to happen when you're not calm and relaxed and you've just eaten dinner and everything is so peaceful? Because that's the way life is. And so we have to train ourselves for life. And that's what martial arts is about. Training ourselves to be able to handle the difficult situations, to be able to not depend on drugs, but to be able to depend upon ourselves, to know that we make our lives, not the drugs. To be able to know that even if we're stuck taking drugs, that we can master that. We can say that I'll be strong enough to be able to not have to take these drugs. You know, like that close family that I was talking about. And it breaks my heart every time I think about it, because the two boys, well, they were taking Ritalin, and why their father didn't get them involved, like he was a great athlete and they were athletics, why didn't he get them involved in more athletics? More things to work off their frustrations, their masculinity. They were just burning with energy. I knew these kids, okay? They reminded me of me when I was a kid. I was burning with energy. I was always getting in trouble in school, in elementary school, because I was running through the hallways and everything. But that's the way some boys are like, okay? And some girls too. But there's got to be an alternative to just giving them drugs, like what they're doing now. And when I tried to convince my friend to just take his kids off Ritalin, check with the doctor, but tell him what the plan is and what the alternative thing is. But he didn't, and they just stayed on Ritalin, and they became drug addicts. They became addicted to cocaine and the other substances like this. This was totally unnecessary. Okay? Totally unnecessary. And I was so angry because my friend, who was such a great athlete, refused to do what he could have done and what he should have done as a father. Okay? To do whatever is necessary. But he wasn't a karateka. And I often felt that was something about it. If he had been a karateka, he would have felt empowered that I can change the life of my child. This is my child and he's ruining his life. But he wasn't able to do that. In karate, we learn that we never quit. We never give up. And that's something from the Buddhism here, which is so prevalent to the Buddhism that is spreading around North America, not just in Tibet and places like that. But it's a Buddhism that misses the point. It misses the power of what Siddhartha Gautama's life was about. Okay? It's a Buddhism that looks upon easy ways. Monastic life is easy, without taxes, without children, without the challenge of things that are really important in life. Children are difficult, but life without them is never going to ever be the same thing. Isn't that right? I mean, life without children, it's just unimaginable. If anyone in this room thinks you're not going to have children, think really about this, because it's the most amazing experience. But yet, you have to be ready for it. You have to be in charge. You have to be responsible. You have to have the self-control and self-discipline to know that you can deal with challenge. It was a big shock to me to see my close friend, whom I had thought the world of, and he just refused to take charge, refused to do what needed to be done. One of the things that I thought about after the last meeting in Toronto, when my resolution was passed, is that I was not as strong as I was. I was not as strong when I was younger as I am now. But it's nothing compared to what I intend to be tomorrow and next month and next year. That we always think about that as a karateka. that we get stronger and stronger and stronger. We never give up in that pursuit. Okay, let me read through this quickly so I can get to reducing the sense of threat. Okay, this is in the section of the book where he's talking about things that you do as a student of Buddhism. Reducing the sense of threat. Be mindful of any sense of threat. This feeling evolved to protect us in environments that were much more dangerous than anything most of us face today. In reality, how likely is it that other people will actually harm you? Where does this guy live? I know he lives in the U.S., in California. But where does he live? You know, the U.S. has an awful lot of violence. Or is he that pampered that he never confronts that level of violence? My cousin, who was a professor at Columbia University in New York City, one of the finest universities in the U.S., and he was attacked because he lived in the area around Columbia University, and some criminals broke into his house in the middle of the night, and they shot him. He wasn't trying to fight them or anything. You know, he just yelled because he was scared when they entered, and they shot him, and it entered into his hip, and he couldn't walk for the rest of his life from that terrible incident. Violence happens. It happens in Canada as well as in the U.S. And how many students? I wonder how many students I've had over the years, countless, that were in karate because they were raped, or because they were badly injured in an attack in a bar or something like that. The bar would be the men being raped. How many of my university students, okay, who were taking my courses at the University of Toronto, either my courses in karate or my courses in Buddhism, and would tell me about the situations that they faced in the university, about the professors that raped them. I mean, it's just unbelievable. You cannot imagine, okay? I know, because I had to deal with this on a day-to-day basis. And he's writing, in reality, how likely is it that other people will actually harm you? I taught my children karate so they can be strong, mentally and physically, because there will be threats in life. That's the way life is. That's why your children are in karate. I'm sure that's why your children and yourself are in karate, and yourself too. Because life has threats to it. Okay, things happen. And as karateka, we can handle these types of threats, and it's so important. And this is what real Buddhism is about. This is what the tradition that the Japanese Buddhism has maintained. Because at the heart of Buddhism in Japan, it's the image of the samurai who never gives up, who will never be defeated. The word samurai means one who helps others, okay, which means incredible strength, right? You can't help others if you're weak. The stories that come out of Japan, of the samurai tradition, of the Buddhist tradition, are stories of people who prevail over adversity, not people who retreat to monasteries. It's a totally different world. But this is the type of Buddhism that we're talking about. This is a William James quotation. It's funny, from this book as opposed to this book, because she's the one who quotes William James. The education of attention would be an education par excellence. How true that is. Most people never acquire attention. They've never trained for it. It's easy in your room, lying in bed. No, even that's hard. But what about someone coming at you, wanting to take your life away? How many people can keep their concentration straight when their very existence is on the line? Very few people. But if you're trained in karate, I mean, that's what the dojo training is about. Okay? Having roundhouse kicks coming to your head, having 2 men attacking you, 4 people attacking you, like lately we've been working on the Empion and Dori. The idea that we can concentrate, that we can focus, that we can handle any situation, no matter how difficult. And you know, the thing is that if you give up, there's 4 attackers, and you give up, you're dead, you're finished. But if there's 4 attackers, even 10 attackers, but that you have that attitude that nothing will make me afraid, nothing will overcome me. Remember, somebody's got to be the first to attack you. And that first one, if you deal with that convincingly, and that's what our martial arts training is about, it doesn't matter how many there are. One of them is going to be first. And you put that guy on the ground hard, the other guy isn't going to want to come. The second or the third or the fourth, they'll be running away. And it's ironic. And if you don't think it's happened to me, I mean, just read Samurai Spirit. But I mean, this has happened to me so many times in my life, where I've seen this for myself. that situations occur that require you to be able to be strong. And as a karateka, that's what we train for, to always be strong, to never be the type of person who's going to be defeated by anybody else. And as I say, whether it's one person or 10 people, once that first guy hits the ground, the rest are not good. They don't want it anymore, okay? Because they don't want to be the next one that's going to go on the ground with a broken rib or a broken arm or whatever else that you want to give to them. But unlike the book that focuses too much on the light, Buddhism light, real martial arts is tough. It's discipline, right? It's hard training. It's long training. It's training that if for the next year I take off, then it's all gone, okay? Because that's the reality. Whatever training you had last year and you come back to the dojo this year, it's all gone. You can retrain again, but you're never going to be quite the same. We had a man in the dojo starting at 65 years old years ago. He was such a great guy, but I was reluctant to accept him as a student because 65 is awfully old to begin doing karate. But he assured me he'd been an athlete all his life, and he looked in really good shape. And I gave him the chance, and he worked really hard. We loved him in the dojo. He was 65, and he really trained hard. He really put his heart into it. And he was in the dojo for the next 10 years. And those plates that are on the piano, most of them were given to us by him. He was an artist, and an art. What do you call that? He advises people. He was an art advisor. Okay, he worked for SO Canada on buying. Companies, big companies like to invest in art, so he would recommend to them pieces of art that they can buy at a good price and that would increase in value, etc. And he was a fantastic guy. He had been in World War II. He had been on planes that had been hit by the kamikaze. Isn't that something? But that didn't sink. I mean, what he'd experienced in his life, he was really, really amazing. And but at 75, he had been divorced. At 75, he decided to remarry. And he told me he was leaving the dojo because, he was remarrying and he was going to spend time with his wife. And so he didn't come back. Then he came back a couple of years later, and he was 80 years old. And he said he's ready to come back now. But at 80 years old, I'm not going to accept him in the dojo because I'm not going to have somebody in the dojo who's going to have a heart attack any minute, But he tried to practice on his own, but he realized, he couldn't do it anymore. And he came back again and talked to me and said he realized I was right and he can't come back to karate. He's just too old. But he said, Sensei, I thought that if you said that we could train even till our 80s. I said, yeah, because I've seen that in Japan. And he said, yeah, but I'm only 80, 81 now, I said, yeah, but you stopped. You stopped. You can't stop. Once you stop, the game is over. Okay? And then he waited until he's 80 years old to come back? I'm sorry. If you start karate at 10 and at 15 you quit and you come back at 20, you're okay. But not if you're 80 years old. You probably remember. No, it would have been before your time. So this is really early days of the dojo.
Okay, really early.
Yeah. Oh, what a great guy. But I was so sorry that he had, he realized himself that, he had gotten too tight and all the flexibility exercises in the world. But if he had kept going, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
He was 75 when he quit the dojo, and he was 75 like you've never seen before, But then he quit.
Mm-hmm.
His wife divorced him eventually, too. Yeah. It's too bad. It's too bad. Okay. Now, I wanted to leave some time for something that I consider to be very, very important. We learned about the plasticity of the brain. And we talked about the importance, for example, of smiling. That being happy can change our lives, even if we're people who are by nature unhappy, by nature, pessimistic. And there is no finer example of somebody who is able to overcome this great sense of unhappiness and pessimism than Ludwig van Beethoven, the greatest composer, the greatest musician ever. And I wanted to finish the course by giving some background on what I consider one of the most important pieces of music. It's not just what I consider, but I'll come back to that in just a moment. Beethoven was so sad. If you give me a moment, I'd like to read this from my notes because I was really in a good mood when I wrote this out, so better than my explaining it now. Beethoven was a most unhappy man. And I mean most unhappy man. I mean, he was really a miserable guy. He was hard to get along with. He was stubborn. People hated him, but they loved his music. And only a man who was so brilliant that, he, in an environment, like Mozart was one of his teachers, because he was younger than Mozart, and Haydn was one of his teachers. But Mozart was never that popular. He was too far ahead of his time. People never came to appreciate his music. But Beethoven's music was so incredibly powerful that even though people would hate him, they would still pay him to write that incredible music. Now, he was a most unhappy man who used his music literally to change his brain. If only he knew what we know today. Beethoven was very unhappy, lonely, unmarried, unlucky in love, and in later life, the cruelest coup of all, death. The cruelest thing of all was that he became deaf. It was something that gradually happened, and in the end, he was totally deaf. In his apartment, he lived on the second floor, he cut off the legs of his piano. So imagine that. You see the piano over there. No, that's a television. Okay, the piano. Okay. He cut off the legs of his piano. And he would lie on the ground and play the music. He couldn't hear it, but he would feel the music, right? The vibrations. That's how he was able to write his music. Now this was earlier in his career that, his life still lie ahead of him. That all his greater pieces of music were written when he was entirely deaf. But he had learned to be able to feel the music. So he cut off the legs of his piano, so that the vibration of the floor as he played his music, and that is how he heard. He wasn't hearing, he was experiencing his music. To be a great musician sometimes takes a weird personality, a weird character. It's nice that within Zen Buddhism there's many different arts, martial arts, archery. There's also poetry, and there's also music. Okay, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring it in at the end of the class. Now, it's different than the martial arts, but any break that we can get that will make us more happy, more optimistic, because as both books have aptly explained, human beings are sort of programmed to be negative, to be pessimistic, because it's what enabled us to survive, okay, as different species in our lizard age, right? But as human beings now, okay, we have to work at it. We have to be disciplined. We have to make sure that we do things in life that are going to make us happy, optimistic, feeling good. We have to be able to push out of our minds bad thoughts. And this weekend, I had so much work to catch up on the paperwork of the dojo. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, I was working all day long. Everyone was out of the house. Everyone went to Quebec, okay, and I was here alone. And I just loved it, partly because the music, as much work as I had, I'm looking at all the work, and Friday I was pessimistic, saying in 4 days I'll never be able to accomplish all this. But it's just so nice being alone and having the music as I'm doing my work, as I'm keeping track of things. It just makes such a difference. So that's why I wanted you to be exposed to this. This is the reason very few people know about the string quartets of Beethoven. Everyone knows Beethoven's Fifth Symphony and Ninth Symphony. It's a couple of other pieces, and Moonlight Sonata, because it's too complex for most people to be able to understand. But it's like discipline in martial arts. If you give it a chance, if you listen to it, for example, in this, there's very good notes, okay, that you can read. Most CDs or music that you get will come with material, so you can have a little bit, or you can look it up, But it just makes such a great difference. This is one other contribution in addition to to the martial arts training, in addition to using our powers of concentration to be optimistic. Okay, so if you want to take any of these, by all means. It doesn't have to be tonight. You just ask me in the dojo. I'm happy to share these things. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank you, Sensei.
I really enjoyed having you all here over these past 4 weeks. It's been a real pleasure.